Well, welcome to Adult Sunday School. As far as hearing people's journeys of faith, it's super exciting. I've not been involved this summer, but I've been involved many other summers. And actually, I will tell you, since Tracy asked me to just take a few minutes, the way I got started teaching adult Sunday school was because Don Tittle asked me to do one of these summer programs many years ago. And we were talking about one of our favorite Christians is what our theme was that summer. And I spoke on. So it was, and I remember that because I've written a couple letters to Don as his life was ending to thank him, encouragement. So who knows what this will be. So let me open us in prayer. Hello. Father, we thank you for this time and for the many blessings that you shower upon us. As we hear each other's story, it is such a great blessing to see your work, how you use people and places and activities to bring us to you. Help us to understand that. Help us to understand how we play a part in that with others in your kingdom. We ask all these things in your son's name. Amen. So introduce Tracy, which actually as she came in, she's like, oh no, that's not a good idea. I will do a brief introduction, but my favorite story of Tracy and Chuck is they got here about 9 years ago when our youngest were both freshmen in high school. Their girls dragged them to the church retreat. And this actually is one of the funniest stories I've done. And Tracy and Chuck were not so excited about the church retreat. So they were sitting at a table all by themselves. And so Lynn and I walked in and we said, oh, who are those people sitting all by themselves? We should go join them. So since then, we've had many conversations about how awful they felt when we came to join them. And they really didn't want us to join them. In the meantime, we've become very and actually have traveled together, which we consider one of the highest things of friendships that you can do. So it is a good story. We can laugh. So we literally almost sick. So that's when we met Tracy and Chuck when they moved to the Chicago area from Norfolk, Virginia. And I probably didn't say it right. They have 4 grown children now. They had 2 girls in high school when they moved here. One of them was our son. So that probably was the big connector of us. And then Grace, their older daughter, is just a little younger than our oldest son. So a lot of fun. They both, Chuck and Tracy, were in the Navy. Tracy flew helicopters. Chuck did nuclear submarines. They do have a picture in their kitchen of the 2 together, which is quite fun. Tracy is someone who grass does not go under her feet. The one thing that I think about Tracy and Chuck is they are so welcoming. They will invite anyone or bring anyone into their home, which includes me. So I've been the great beneficiary of that. So with no further ado, even though Tracy wanted me to take more time, I get to introduce my good friend Tracy and hear her faith journey and what God has done in her life from the time she was born into the O'Malley family in Massachusetts many years ago to today. So Tracy.
They just stole a pertinent part of my story.
Oh,
yeah, 20 minutes left. When Terry Suter asked me to do this, I said yes because I have this real problem saying no. But my instant thought was my husband is a much better speaker, he's funnier, and stories are good. Should have asked him. So Terry, take a note. But you got me, so I apologize for that. So my faith journey, where I am now, and here, I need my glasses. Gosh, obviously it began a long time ago. Oh, look at that. So I'm going to start briefly with obviously where I am now, because that's what Terry said the subject was. And I have to tell you, I was rewriting this at 6 this morning because all through the night I was like, well, that's a stupid thing to say, or that's not relevant, or do you really want to say that? people who I'm gonna interact with, probably not. I left a huge baby out. In fact, when you said it, I was like, yeah, I almost forget about that now. But that was obviously a huge part of our lives as well. So feel free, many of you know me, jump in, ask a question, or if you think I missed something that needs to be in here, just ask me. I'll answer anything, mostly. Okay, so really where I am now, I have a deeper faith than I ever dreamed of having, truly. I pray frequently, as in all day long, mostly. Many of you knew we just climbed Kilimanjaro. I don't think I stopped the whole time talking to God in my head. I'm trying daily to channel my faith into everything I do, and in my case, say mostly, because that's where I struggle. I'm not always successful, but now finally grasping and understanding the fact that I'm forgiven for these things spurs me on to be better at them, to channel the Lord into my life in ways where I had never done before. My former pastor used to begin each service by saying, "Welcome, sinners." And the first time, I grew up Catholic, so that, so people don't say things like that. And so I remember thinking at that church, also a first press in Norfolk, I was thinking, wow, that's pretty deep, right? Because shit, that's what we are. That's what I am. I don't see, but that's what I am. I'm like, wow, he must have known I walked in today. Awesome. But I really liked that, and it helped me realize that it's a road, it's a journey. I mean, the people that are gifted young with faith, I'm very young. I can't wrap my brain around, and I'm so happy for them. But that's not the way it worked with me. So I realized I was on this road for life, that I'm not a better or worse person than, fill in the blank for yourselves, because I know I spent a lot of my life thinking, Jesus, that person's a terrible person, or I'm a terrible person, or, whatever. But I'm constantly striving to be a better person. And in that, I have, my faith has led me to that. And hopefully I'm a better person today than I was. And that when it comes to my turn, thank the Lord, let's say, good on you. You're welcome here. So that's where I am now. Sorry, I'm just gonna grab that t-shirt. I thought I was gonna do so well. Sorry, jump in. But it was interesting. To those of you know that I just climbed Kilimanjaro, really, thanks to God at my side the whole way, because I really didn't think we were gonna make it. And I really wanted Chuck to make it, because that was his dream, to climb Kilimanjaro in this 61st year of life. Well, mine, he won't be 60 in October, but there you go. That was his dream. So while you're on Kilimanjaro, I don't know if anybody else has done it, and I don't want to bore you with tedious details, but it is so dull. It is so incredibly tedious. Just one, they use the term poly-poly, which just means go slow. It is one step in front of the other the whole way up. And by step, I mean like almost heel to toe on that last day. We took a 7-day climb, 5 days of it. It was interesting. It was hard. It was rock climbing. It was, some paths, some not. Challenging and interesting, and the scenery was great, but still tedious every day. Same breakfast, walk for 5 hours, the same lunch, maybe walk some in the afternoon, maybe not. No lights, no anything. You're asleep at like 7:30, and then repeat. And then on the day that you climb the last 4,000 feet, you actually get up at midnight and start the climb. So you can't see anything. And they do that on purpose, because it's very precarious. The footing is unsure. It's like lava, rock, sand. It's just uncomfortable. And so if you can't see the edge, right, you're not going to be so, frightened, I guess, or, disinclined to continue. But you really don't need that to be disinclined to continue. So you have one line on your head, and all you see are these groups of people going up the mountain like in a snake. And if you turn, which why would you, but if you do, that's all you see behind you. And as you get up into altitude, you feel exhausted, but you can't, they don't let you sit down on a rock or rest for more than 1 to 3 minutes max, because you instantly get cold as soon as you stop moving, freezing. And in this plod and trod and prayer going on in my head the whole way, it suddenly occurred to me that very sort of similar to my life and my faith journey, right? 1 foot, my whole life was like that. Then those of you who know me know this. I'm like, go, 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 go. Just head down into the fray, complete the task, move to the next. Head down, and my whole life has been like that. And I've never felt like I fit in anywhere, even in my own family. I'm one of 7 children. I never felt like I belonged. So then, it makes sense. Hence the Navy thing, hence the get out, hence the try to find something else there. And this is what was running through my head for 7 days. So many steps, face down, looking at your feet for 2 reasons, and much like life. Too tired to raise your head, and you have to watch every single step for safety. And that encapsulates me like to a T for my whole life. Don't look up, keep your head in, make it happen. Many times I walked right into whomever was in front of me if they stopped short on the mountain. But I compare that again back to my life with the head down in the fray, dealing with whatever caught me up short, and then pressing on to the goal, whatever that was at the time. Hardly ever to be in a moment, to observe my surroundings or to enjoy the people that I was with. Everything was task oriented. Which isn't to say I didn't enjoy the things I was doing all those years, because I did. But the direct reflection on my walk with Christ, who I now know was always with me through all those years, it was I who didn't notice, right? Because he got me through. I had written a whole list of negative experiences to describe how Christ was with me through all those experiences. But I get back to that's so obvious. And all of you who have faith probably think the same thing. It's so obvious. He was there the whole time. So I don't want to focus on those events specifically, just to sort of give some background as to how these stories from my past framed where I am now. But I don't like to dwell on them, because I think that drags me down, and I want to be beyond that. So this is kind of going to be the fast and furious. The first one, Terry said it's 45 minutes. I was like, damn, that's a really long time. And I thought, no, it's not. It's 45 seconds for every year I've been born. And then we'll really hit that tedious mark, right? But in addition, to sort of feeling inadequate about sharing my faith journey with all of you, I couldn't peg a place to start. So the road to now, I've just got some seminal moments that form my faith. As Lynn said, I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts. I'm one of 7 children in the middle. I often joke that I had 14 years in Catholic school down the drain. But the truth is that my faith, and possibly my lack thereof when I was young, was formed there in that Catholic environment. I was there when public punishment was a daily happening that you just, if hope didn't fall on you that day. Nuns were to be feared, priests sanctified, and everybody marched on. They certainly could do no wrong, but you certainly could. you stubbed your toe or fell down, that was God getting you for something that he knew you had done. And my mom used to say that all the time, semi as a joke, but that was the environment, right? It's always God getting you, and you can never be good enough. So almost why try? The Bible in my house was something where you put marriage, death, and birth certificates. And they fell out when you opened it up. If somebody died, and you had to choose something pretty full use of the Bible there. All right, so I'm going to fast forward and jump around, and I hope that's not too misleading. Again, just ask me a question if you have one. So when I was studying abroad in 1983, my sister was murdered by arsonists. I see this as one of the moments that changed my life, certainly emotionally, but spiritually as well. And it also was an event in my family that drew us incredibly closer together. It was, in the long run, something that was such a positive outcome from it. We're close to this day. At any rate, my mother, who was a devout Catholic, we used to joke that she had the way home to God. She nearly left the church. And that really set me back on my heels, because I thought, I've skipped ahead a little bit now, but I'm this ship your faith? Did you grow up on our street? Did you live in the same house I was brought up on? Because there was so much awful stuff that was happening that then this is what brings you to leaving the church. And so as a young woman, it seemed like a golden opportunity to be like, okay, I've had enough of that, so I'm out. This whole God thing is bullshit, and I don't need it, and it's not working for you, so why bother? It isn't that I didn't believe that God existed. I just never felt that he cared about me or my family or the people I knew. And I've had this conversation with Paul even after we moved here, that, I think God has a few bigger issues to deal with than, Tracy and O'Malley in her little world. The life of one woman, how could that possibly require your attention? At any rate, I have had to fly home from Spain to go to my funeral, and I wasn't going to be able to go back because we couldn't afford it. But my sister and brother-in-law paid for me to go back, and I was so grateful, because the only thing worse than having lived through this section where my sister died would have been having to stay in Springfield. I just couldn't be there, couldn't be with the memories, hated every minute of it. And I was so thankful that they provided for me to leave my hometown and go back to Spain. But then where was I? I was in Spain alone, with no one who understood that ordeal. And the woman that I lived with was a Spanish woman, obviously, and there was another American who lived there. And the very first thing she said to me, when I had gone about 3 weeks, she said, yeah, your Spanish has really suffered greatly because of this. Jane used to be the worst, but now you're the worst. Literally, the minute I walked in the door, I was like, yeah, thanks. So there I was, traveling around Spain by myself, going to school, and I would go into churches to just sit, never to worship, never when anybody else was in there, just to sit and soak up the peace and try to talk to God. The peace I got talking to God, not so much. But I think it was the beginning of my search for something more in my life, something more in a relationship with the Lord, but not knowing where to turn or how to go about that. Also in my life, there were very few or not any examples really of decent men's behavior. My father was an abusive alcoholic our whole lives. I really joined the Navy just to get out of Springfield. And it's making it sound like it's such a horrible place. I still live there. My mother and father both lived there until they died. but I can't go back. I dated all the wrong kind of people because I just didn't really believe there were any good men. And I'm sorry, I know that's sexist. That's just what I believed, that all men were horrid. In fact, so I married, then I joined the Navy in 1985. I was frequently the only whatever event, I was in, certainly in my flight class. And, you just get hit on all the time. All the women, it's not special for me. Tedious way of life. So I ended up marrying the first guy that asked me to marry him because I was like, well, at least I won't be out there anymore, right? This will be great. Knowing it was all wrong, and Lynn knows the rest of that story. Things I called it off. My parents had just put, wait for it, $400 down at a reception hall. $400. And my mother was so angry, and I was like, okay, I'll make it right. So I married this guy, big mistake. Because I didn't, even though I knew it wasn't the right answer, I didn't have enough self-confidence or faith in myself to follow what my correct instinct was and walk away. So I was in this terrible marriage for 7 years, so they had that. After then had some until the person that his infidelity had been going on all the whole time. Anyway, that ended that. And then I was pretty much at a broken. I was just broken. I was in the Navy. I was already stationed in Hawaii, living alone. He had been still in San Diego. It was, I put him through law school. You know what it's like to divorce a lawyer, a nightmare. Anyway, so I was pretty broken. I called my mother to tell her I was getting divorced. She told me that nobody understood the word commitment anymore, and you really needed to see. I really needed to see it through, and I was just still on my heels. And I said to her, and then I didn't say anything for like, it seems like 5 minutes. It's probably 10 seconds. And I said, well, I'm already waking up 7 years later and thinking I made the biggest mistake of my life. I don't want to wake up 30 years from now, which is I'm about my mother's age then. I don't want to wake up 30 years from now and be saying the same thing. I mean, she'd had a terrible marriage. And then the silence was on her part. And she said, well, dear, you do whatever you have to do, and I'll be here to support you in any way I can. And it changed my relationship with my mother exponentially, as you can imagine. So I lost my place. Anyway, the light in that section of my life not only came from this moment with my mother that changed our relationship, which was great, but in all the time, my whole life, I had said I wanted to have a lot of kids. I wanted to live in a big old house with a lot of kids. 10, 12, didn't matter. All of a sudden, my son was small. Jesus, the scale has had 15. Mom, step it up. When I made a decision, literally on my wedding night, I was like, I'm never bringing children into this relationship because I've lived as a child in a house where the relationship was terrible, and it's the worst. And I know I don't corner the market on that, so I'm sorry if anybody else had that experience, because it truly sucked. But I did make that decision, and 7 years later, when I got divorced, I was so grateful. And this sounds terrible, but I was so grateful that I didn't have any children, because I couldn't imagine being connected to this man for the rest of my life, to share children. And I see God in that. I do. Okay. I hate double-sided printing. Okay. So there I was in my early 30s, alone in a very high level, constant job that was pretty much 24/7, which I threw myself into even more to keep myself from throwing myself off the roof of the building. And I say that only half jokingly because it was just not a good time, not a good time in my life. Fortunately, I had a friend that stayed beside me the whole time. Her husband was at sea. She had one kid and a live-in nanny. And every single night, every single day that I was not working, which was really rare, because maybe Sunday afternoon, a few evenings a week, she would come and have dinner with me or invite me to her house or just to stay with me. And at this point, so I was not going to church at all, back to the faith and prayer issue. And I prayed very rarely back to what could be so important in my life that God would be concerned about me. And I plowed out in the same manner, step by step, back into the fray, keep your head down, get the job done. The gift that God gave me for dealing with all of this throughout my life, when I didn't have any verbalized knowledge of faith, was running. And I would run and literally begin to sob while I was running through all of this stuff, all of it. From the time I was 13 until I couldn't run anymore last year. But I dealt with it. Those of you who are runners get that. Those of you who aren't, think we're insane. But yeah, it was crazy. Sometimes I would just have to stop. And then I'd get mad at myself for stopping, of course, and being such a pansy, and I'd run on. But it was such a gift, and kept me, well, as sane as I can be. So that is definitely a gift from God to me. So about 7 months later, I met Chuck, a friend of ours, a mutual friend, not Chuck at all. Was trying to set us up, and I was avoiding her at all costs. I was like, absolutely not. Am I going down this road again? Not a chance. And so one night, he lived in the same building that I did, the bachelor officers' quarters in Pearl Harbor, and I drove in from work, and there's like 2 levels to the parking lot there, and so I was like, shit, that's Kathy with that Chuck guy. I was like, oh man. So I whipped around and I went in the lower parking lot, and then literally, I am not exaggerating, you could kind of scoot along the wall and get to there was a gap before the elevators that I thought I could, and they wouldn't see because they were sort of up in the other part. So I'm literally doing this thing, looking over, hoping they don't see. And just as I make a move to make it like to the elevator that was right there was Kathy. Oh, Tracy, there you are. I'm like, shit. So I walk over, and finally I'm like, yeah, wicked tired. I've been to the Sings house all night. Gotta go. Blah blah blah. But I had to. I agreed to go to dinner with him at their house. They were having some people over the next night, so I went to that, and that was fine. It was a group event, and I ran out of there as fast as I could. And then I saw him on Friday night at the O Club. Why wouldn't you? And he asked me to go out. No. Another friend said, why don't we ask him to join us at this dinner on Saturday night that we have to go to? And it was all submariners in charge of submarine. And I was like, that's not a good idea. And she's like, that's a great idea. So we asked him, and he says no. And I'm like, even better. He says, but I'll meet at this place. They have really good dancing at this place. No kidding, the name of it was Porky's. Chris Farris. Yeah, can you make that up? Anyway, great band. So I go with my friend, and he's gonna meet Sarah, and he's not there. And it's like midnight. And so I said, it's midnight. And her husband's like, yeah, it's midnight. And there's nothing to do. Gotta go. And she said, we're gonna wait. He said, no, we're gonna go. So finally I'm like, let's just go. This is becoming too hard. We get in the car, we're driving down the highway, and he was driving this red T-top TRC7 at the time, and it pulls up like a opposing light, like 5 blocks from his car. And I said, Becky looks over and I go, yeah, that's him. She goes, turn the car around, Kevin. What? She goes, turn the car around. this good little nuclear submarine, turns the car around, we go back, the rest is history. I saw him, so I'm excited to go to brunch. I said, I'm with him all Sunday afternoon. And he was going on deployment on Monday. So I thought, well, this is easy. So the problem was we connected so strongly. I mean, some of the stuff I just told you now, I told him on Sunday afternoon. And that was so bizarre for me because I wasn't very trusting of men, as you can imagine. And it all just came out. And then I noticed all these books on his shelves and I thought he was a Bible banger. And I was like, oh no, that's not, I'm not going that route. But it turns out, no, he was just a faithful guy who read a lot of books about, reads a lot. And when he left on Monday morning, so, we leave 0:30 and they're pulling out. And in Pearl Harbor, you leave the pier, but then the families all go down to a point closer to Hickam Airfield and you can see them go around the point and submerge. So I was like, it's gonna work late. So I go down to the point and I watch the ship pull out and, they blow the whistle and they sink, I mean, literally sink, dive, I should say. And I had this huge sense of loss, just this completely vacant feeling. I was like, wow, I can't believe I told him all those things, and I can't believe I feel this way. And so I wasn't ready to go back to the office, so I went to the chapel on Pearl Harbor. It was a small wooden building with a little choir loft, and there's nobody in it on a Monday. It's always open, and there's no permanent clergy. Like units have chaplains, and then they use the chapel as they see fit. So I was in the alone, and I was praying and thinking, oh, what am I getting into? This is a mistake, and it's too soon, and yada yada yada. And then I thought I heard somebody in the choir loft. So I was like, oh, that's weird, creepy. So I turn around and somebody still sitting there, and I'm soaking in the silence and I'm praying and I'm thinking, Lord, don't let me go wrong here. They're doing that bargaining thing. I'll do anything you want. I'll become a don't let me go down a wrong road here. And I hear it again, and I was like, okay, some creepy kid is up there. I stand up and look, there's nobody. And I sat down and I had this overwhelming sense of being hugged. I was like, oh my God, that's God. I was just like blown away. And so I sat there a while longer and had never felt that in my life. And I went back up the hill and I went to work and I never dated anybody else. And actually that very day when I got home, my finalized divorce was in the mail. Mm-hmm. So weird circumstance, I don't know. Leave that in your heads. So anyway, there we were. Married. So, and then 2 years after that, we got married. And that's really when I started to have some true faith that there was something more, that God was out there. And obviously, working for me, helping me get through all these situations. It was Chuck who brought me back to church. We got married in Annapolis, the Naval Academy, but did we went to every church of every denomination except Catholic in the greater Annapolis area. And we settled on a Presbyterian church, Christ Our Anchor, which I just loved. I was drawn to the name. And it was a small church, maybe 120, continuous parishioners. And we liked it there, and and felt at home. A lot of curveballs over the years. My two sons are my stepsons, and that came with a whole lot of exacerbated issues because of toxic with the boys' biological mother and Chuck's family, who adored her. An incredibly stressful job, a bunch of miscarriages. Gave me plenty to pray about, but I couldn't get that warm, connected feeling again. I was just longing to have that. And then, and you know, I still felt sort of spiritually alone and searching. And back to it, you know, tough job, deployment, kids, schools, head down. Every step of the way. There's Charlotte was born. We both deployed, moved 4 times. Every time you're changing churches and doctors and all the hassle of that. But we always came back to the Presbyterian Church. And the final one that we were the last 12 years in Norfolk was First Pres with, you know, Welcome Sinners. It was like, oh, yeah, it's me. So we still felt, both of us, that we just still didn't like fit in. And that's a Navy town, right? I mean, tons of Navy people were at that church. So finally, not being one to go on retreats anytime, not really group people, I decided to go on a women's retreat at First Pres that year. I don't know who was doing that. Somebody that really knew. It was a really you know, broad lead for me. So I went on the women's retreat, and after I signed up, Chuck's father died quite suddenly. Downhill skiing at 83. I was like, oh yeah, pick me, Lord. So, but it was a tremendous shock to the family, obviously, because he was incredibly fit. And I was going to cancel the retreat. This is sort of the point of this. You know, you really should go. You should go on this retreat. So I went, and one of the speakers, I tried to find her name, remember it, but I couldn't so long ago. She had some ailment that made it difficult for her to walk. She came in with an aide on the arm of an aide, and then, you know, walked up to the front, up to the podium, and it was really dire. She was up a couple steps and set up her speech for her, and then went and sat down. And I almost thought, is this a charlatan? I mean, literally, her whole personages was transformed as she started to tell her story. And she was able to like move around and talk and I mean, she could always talk, that was an issue, but gesture and be animated. And it was as if I was watching a miracle happen. It was crazy. And she spoke for, I don't know, half an hour or so, and then stepped back from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage. And then her aide came up and helped her down and had her seat. And I was to be seated at her table at lunch. And so I was skeptical, admit it. And I was talking with her about her faith journey. And I thought, gosh, how do I get that? How do I feel like she does? That's amazing. And I didn't mean the physical transformation, really. I just meant this woman was aglow in her faith and her love of the Lord. And I was stunned. I'd never seen anything like that. And so the next morning we had the farewell services, everybody left to go home. And I was sitting in the back, don't judge me. And I was, I was thinking about Chuck and his relationship with his father and our kids and how they were going to miss their grandfather. And I was really upset. And there it was again. That whole I am here. And I was blown away. It was fantastic. And, all of these things were so many years apart that my faith would go up And I would feel so great, and then it would go down, and that was also on me. That wasn't on God, that was on me. To get swept up again in the mundane and tediousness of, work and life, and all that. And not being focused enough. Be about what I need done. What he wanted me to say and do. And so. Yeah, that woman had crazy faith. So we still have that issue with not fitting in. And I mean, anywhere, as I said, in my family, in the Navy, I was always the only woman. And actually, that never made me not feel like I fit in. It was, you're not really one of the wives, so you don't fit in with them. And you're not a guy, so clearly you're not all in there. So I didn't really have a place. I loved what I did. I loved flying. I loved the guys. I loved my crew. All of that was great, but you never really can crack that niche. And so we plodded on. Kids grew up, and suddenly it was, time. I decided to retire. Didn't have to, but I decided to. And girls were in elementary school. Jack and Andrew were in high school. Jack was about to be a senior, and I thought it was a good time to move to the Navy. But that had been my whole adult life, and so I left the Navy, and then I was on the other side of the fence, right? So if you think you don't fit in there, they really liked me in that carpool line at school. I'm like, you, go, drop your kid off, don't get out of the car, you move. And I'm like, holy shit, who is this woman? Out of nowhere. So my face was sort of, now what? And the girls were at this Catholic school that fortunately we saw the light shortly thereafter and took them out of, but I substitute taught there. I knew I never wanted to work for the government and ever again. And I hadn't actually had a job interview except one time for the job I had when I met Chuck when I was the commander-in-chief's aide. So it's like, interview, what? So I did, kind of the same stuff I'm doing now, volunteering a lot. So I worked at the school as a substitute. I coached 3 soccer teams. I then filled the COO spot at the city soccer league, the inner city league. I worked on development at the school. I just volunteered all over the place, and found that was really a good move for me because I wanted to be in service. I wanted to help people, and I could do that, but I was way too spread out. And then when a job came up that I really wanted to do, executive director at Habitat for Humanity, which I love that organization. Chuck retired and got the job out here in Chicago. I was like, Chicago? Nobody really lives in Chicago. How close is the ocean to Chicago? So we moved to Chicago. It was also the only place we had ever lived, obviously, that wasn't a Navy town. So even when you're in the Navy, I moved just twice while Chuck was at sea. Your unit knows you're coming. You need people at your house. 5 guys show up at your door to help you move your piano or whatever. It's just, that's the way it is. People that you didn't know before. You're part of this giant Navy family, and there's always help. And then we moved here, and we were like, those guys going to show up. Anybody. And we didn't, it was all just so different. And, we bought our house and it was under construction, and I'm like, we didn't need to hire. I mean, just like stupid things like that you never think of. I had nobody to ask to say, who should I hire? To do whatever. And we moved 4 times in 6-7 months. We got here in August, we moved into the house in April. So we moved 4 times in between when we got here in August and when we moved into the house, and it was insane. train of thought. Oh, and then our daughter Charlotte, our youngest, was not speaking to us. Hated that we moved, said, you know, she was going into freshman year in high school. She only really knew, the other kids knew other houses and moving, but she did. She had her whole life in Norfolk from the time she was 2. So same soccer team since the time she was 5. All the same girls were playing soccer, all had made the high school team. They were all going, and we were leaving, and she hated us for it. So we were seeking a church that had, like, didn't even care about us at that point. It's like the girls have to have some place where they can make friends and find a church home, because we've got to keep them directed in faith, right? So we went everywhere. And finally, somebody either associated with soccer or the school said, well, you know, if you're looking for a good youth group, First Presbyterian Church of River Forest has one. And we're like, River Forest? That's a different town. What do we know? Close what? So we came to church here. And during the service, the youth group was on Sunday nights, and they say, well, youth group's on some, tonight, blah, 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 7 o'clock. And of course, Steve Kovic made us, that Steve gets everybody, right? So had a long chat with Steve, talking a nice chat with him. And we get home and I said, well, you girls should go to that youth group. And they said, no, we're not going. Like, you're going to youth group, get in the car. So like Grace, who had gotten her license the 2 days before we drove out to Chicago, it's like, oh, we'll go to youth group, but I'm driving. Like, fair enough. So they go off to youth group. And they come home hours later, and they're like, I'm like, the heck happened? And they said, oh, and guess what? There's going to be a church retreat, and we have to go. And I was like, no. Not even happening. We don't even have a house yet. Oh, we lived in a hotel for a while. We rented a house, and then the dear Janelle Barclay, I called, that was up. That's another guy that up with that. So they come home with this flyer, and we're like, pretty sure we missed the registration date. No, we can go, we asked. Like, we're not going, but you guys can go. Just tell me where, who I write the check to. They're like, no, Mom, it's a family retreat. Oh, shit, we have to go. So we go to the diary retreat, which was fabulous. But as Lynn said, that was actually in my comments here. So after we had the whole Steve Kovic thing at church, we came a few more weeks, and then we go on the retreat. And as Lynn said, we were sitting in the back thinking, this is where we like to be. Just on the back table, we'll have our little dinner, we'll go to our cabin where we belong. And the Hancocks make a 4-engine run on our table. Oh my God, they're here. We're gonna have to talk to them. And the rest is history, obviously we're dear friends now, and as so many people here are, we couldn't be thankful enough that we got sent to Chicago and that we found First Presbyterian Church, because through it, all that has happened in the time that we have, the 9 years that we have been here, as my faith has grown stronger and stronger. Much due to interactions with all of you and the good things that happened with my kids. And where we are today. And so in the last few years, with the kids gone, it's a different life. Those of you who are listening, you know that. And there's a lot more focus on, you guys see all the stuff on Facebook. Yeah, we like to travel. We travel a lot. And that's good for us because we're not used to staying home, sitting still. And it has given me a lot of time to refocus on my faith, where I'm going with that, and that still remains to be seen, obviously. But I'm hoping that You know, over the next few years, for both of us, for all of us, and my family, that we can reflect more on how far we've come and what being here has meant to us as a family after being removed from everything, you know. You know, that saying that life begins at the end of your comfort zone has surely been true for us. And I'm very grateful for all of the input and experiences I have had with all of you here. So over the course of the years here, I had a women's Bible study meeting at my house, went to the women's retreats, we went to the family retreats. I had many conversations with Paul, Alice, talks with so many other friends, and I've never been part of a community more steeped in faith, and it's just been fabulous. As kind of a wrap up, when Allison invited me to join her doctoral thesis group on prayer, I had the same reaction again. No, definitely not. Don't pray out loud. Can't be. Just don't do. Back to the I don't do. It's hard to say no to Allison, and so I went through that, and it was fantastic. My image of God, and ready to crack the whip anytime we went out of line, and not as a loving father, you know, still would rear its ugly head on occasion, but her technique of visualizing Christ in the room, or the Holy Spirit with you, of God overseeing as you pray, was very impactful and for me, and helped me in my prayer life, because now I can see Christ sitting at the table while I'm cooking or baking, and with us as a family on the holiday, and there when we need him, all the time, it seems like. You know, so I have become avid praying person, and I love it. It's gotten me closer to Christ and people I love, and I'm forever grateful for that. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to have finally found the place where I fit in, and I feel it. So.
I've got a question.
I almost swore. But I didn't. That's why.
So, and I think we've talked about this, but to share with everybody else. So you had mentioned that you like were head down into the fray. Do you think that's you, just how you're wired up, or is that naval commander coming out of training?
Oh, I think it's wired from my
It's
birth.
wired for you. You've always been like
Yeah, who was the first child to say no to my father. That did not go well.
I'd like to share that. Good thing I was fast even then. Yeah, and it's interesting. My mother was a very strong person. I come from a family of 6 girls and 1 boy. Sadly, that meant my father had some restraint. So sadly, that meant brother got beat up a lot. The rest of us are, I wouldn't say they're all like me, because that's not true, but we became very capable women because my mother could do anything, fix anything. She was amazing in that regard. She filled it all in. Part of that is, if anybody's familiar with, you know, adult children of alcoholics or spouses of alcoholics, you spend a lot of your life trying to cover, right? Trying to make up for what's missing because of whoever the alcoholic is. And my mother, wow, she was a queen of fixing, and not in good way. But the impact on us at least, for the sake of life skills, that benefit. So, yeah.
I want to say how much I appreciated your story because you didn't grow up. I hear so many stories here in this area about they were raised in a Christian family, they went to church, they always were Christians and they always, you know, their families were Christians and they were Christians, and it's so nice because I wasn't raised that way, and I always think, wow. There's two parts. There's jealousy that I wasn't raised that way, and there's they must be really cool, you know. Because I can see all my thoughts that happens to them. So I have that appreciates that they do such someone. Thank you. That's the spirit and passes. The things that they comes to us now. Just now and that way, so to do this. So every event, all the family events. First coming back to the half of years ago. And there's 7 events.
There's always some big event, right? You had the birthdays and all that, and all the graduations. So my mother was always cooking, and I loved that, and I love a party, as you know. And I always wanted to go to the Cordon Bleu, always. All the time I was in the Navy, because Chuck and I entertained, we probably entertained more than anybody else we knew in the Navy who wasn't an admiral and had staff for it, right? So probably 4 times a year, we had over 100 people for dinner, as well as, I mean, Chuck would come and call us, and we'd call, hey, can I bring 8 guys home from the war college? Yeah, sure, you know, whatever. But I always wanted to be a better cook. And so when I retired, I used my GI Bill. I went to the Cordon Bleu downtown here. And then I went on to, they closed, and that was lucky for me because I was then able to go to the French pastry school, which baking is my true love. And that was a fantastic experience. So I did that. So that's what led to that. I just always wanted to be a better cook. I never intended to open a restaurant or a bakery. That sounds like a lot of work. So right. It is a lot of work. I worked at Citrine for about a year because you had to work full time for 3 months before they would confer your degree from the Cordon Bleu. And that was a fantastic experience. I ended up staying for almost a year.
But a ton of work.
A ton of work. Yeah. So yeah, carrying those 10-gallon containers of soups and sauces and broths is not trivial. Literally, I would get home and I would just lay on the couch. Chuck would be like, "What's for dinner?" I'd be like, "I don't know, whatever you're making." That's what the culinary thing. So I'm available to make cakes or whatever, you know. Now I'm still working down at Chicago Hope Academy in the development department. There's some money for them, people that are really, really changing Black and brown lives in the city. So I feel also blessed to have made that connection through Allison Lundeen and this church because it's a great mission. And I love being down there around those kids. It's all good.
Thank you for thank you for allowing us to share today.
Help us to understand what you have for each one of our lives. And we pray as we go to worship that you would transform each one of us. In your name. We pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.